Hey guys, tonight we are traveling back in time, but we're not going to the Rome you see in movies, the Grand Colosseum, the stoic senators in their white togas, the disciplined legions marching in perfect formation. No, we're going to the weird part. The part of Roman history that feels less like a documentary and more like a buzz, a fever dream cooked up by a rebellious teenager with unlimited power. We are diving into the short, chaotic, and utterly baffling reign of the Emperor Elagabalus. And you are him. It's a wild ride. And let's be honest, you'll be lucky to survive it. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It's a small click for you, but it makes a huge difference for this little corner of the internet. And while you're at it, I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop your city and the time in the comments below. It's always a quiet thrill to see how far these stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you're aware of isn't power, or role, or destiny. It's the sun, the relentless, baking sun of Syria. You are in your home city of Emesa, and your world, for now, is confined to the magnificent temple that dominates the skyline. You are not yet an emperor. You are not even Elagabalus. You are Varius Itus Barcinus, a boy of about 13 or 14. And you have a very important job. You are the hereditary high priest to the god Elagabalus. Forget the Roman gods you've heard of: Jupiter with his thunderbolts, Mars with his spear. Your god is different. It's not a statue carved into a human-like form. It's a rock, a conical black stone, smooth and oddly mesmerizing. That is housed in the heart of your temple. Some whisper that it fell from the heavens, a direct gift from the cosmos. It's a BYTYL, an ancient, sacred stone, and it is the center of your universe. Your life moves to the rhythm of its worship. Each morning, you are awakened not by a gentle parent, but by the distant clang of temple bells. You are dressed in fine silks, shimmering purples and golds that would make a Roman senator blush. Your eyes are lined with kohl, not for vanity, but for ritual. It makes your gaze more intense, more divine, as you stand before the sacred stone. Your family, a powerful line of priest kings, has tended this deity for generations. Your mother, Julius Goeemias, and your grandmother, the formidable Julia Maze, watch you with a mixture of pride and something else, something you can't quite decipher. It's a calculating glint, a patient ambition. You don't think about politics. You think about the steps of the sacred dance you must perform. You feel the cool stone of the temple floor under your bare feet. You smell the intoxicating mix of frankincense and myrrh that hangs heavy in the air, a permanent perfume that clings to your clothes and hair. You lead processions through the streets of Emesa, the crowds parting before you, their eyes fixed on the golden chariot carrying your god. You are a star in this small, sun-drenched world. This is your reality. Rome is a distant noise. It's the place where the coins come from, the place the soldiers talk about. It's where your great-aunt, Julia Domna, was once empress, married to the mighty Septimus Severus. But that all feels like a story from another life. You've heard the recent news. Of course, the current emperor, Macarianus, is unpopular. He is a bean counter who seized power after assassinating your cousin, the Emperor Caracola. Your grandmother, Julia Maze, was forced to leave Rome and return here, to Emesa. Her vast wealth and influence suddenly cut off from the heart of the empire. You see her sometimes, a shadow of fierce intelligence in the temple courtyard, her mind working, her gaze distant. You are too young to understand the intricate web of power, betrayal, and opportunity she is weaving. You don't realize that you're dancing. Your youthful devotion, your very existence, has become the central thread in her grand design. To you, she is just your grandmother. But to her, you are a key, a very special key. As you perform the rites, You sometimes catch a reflection in a polished shield or a basin of water. You see a boy draped in splendor, his face a mask of sacred focus. But who is he? The precise nature of the ceremonies you lead is a subject that historians still debate. Roman authors, who would later write your story, described them with suspicion and disgust, painting them as bizarre, un-Roman spectacles. But for you, in this moment, they are simply life. They are the air you breathe, the purpose that flows through your veins. You are the bridge between the heavens and the earth, the voice of a silent, stone god. You are powerful here, in your own way. But you have no idea that the stage you are on is about to get infinitely larger. And the audience, far less forgiving. For now, you are just a boy, dancing for a stone god under the Syrian sun, blissfully unaware that a storm is gathering just over the horizon. You don't understand the meetings that happen after sundown. The temple, usually quiet and decorating in the cool desert night, now buzzes with a low, ardent energy. Men with the hard, sun-beaten faces of soldiers come and go, their sandals scuffing softly on the stone floors. They don't come to worship your god. They come to see your grandmother. Your grandmother, Julia Mazzei, is the true architect of this looming storm. Think of her not as a kindly old woman, but as a master chess player who has been patiently waiting for the board to be set just right. She had been at the absolute center of power for decades. As the sister of an empress and the aunt of an emperor, she knew the marble halls of the Palatine Hill better than her own home in Emesa. She understood that in Rome, power wasn't just about armies, it was about money, influence, and narrative. When the Emperor Macarianus killed her nephew Caracalla and seized the throne, he made a critical error. He sent her home to Syria but let her keep her colossal fortune. It was an oversight that would cost him everything. He saw an old woman to be pensioned off. He failed to see the most dangerous political operator in the empire. And now, from her retirement in Emesa, she orchestrates her comeback. You see her speaking with the legionary commanders. You don't hear the words, but you see the effect. You see their deference, their greed, their growing excitement. Your grandmother isn't just talking chess, dangling a proposition. She knows the soldiers are unhappy. Macarianus, ever the administrator, had cut their pay and benefits to try and balance the imperial budget. It was a sensible move for an accountant, but a fatal one for a usurper whose only claim to power rested on the loyalty of those very soldiers. Loyalty, as your grandmother knows, is a commodity that can be bought. Her plan is a breathtakingly audacious gamble. She intends to use her personal fortune to buy an army and overthrow the reigning emperor of Rome. It's the kind of scheme that either ends with you on a throne or your entire family's heads on spikes. There is no middle ground. You start to notice other things. Chests, heavy and clinking, being moved from the family vaults under the cover of darkness. They aren't being moved into the temple treasury, they're being loaded onto carts headed towards the nearby camp of the 3rd Gallic Legion. You see your mother, Juliet Gazo, by DMIS, in these meetings too. She echoes your grandmother's words, her eyes shining with a feverish light you've never seen before. Historians still debate the dynamic between these two women. Was your mother a willing Undiga co-conspirator, driven by her own ambition, or was she merely a dutiful daughter? A pawn in a game designed by her far more ruthless and experienced mother. From where you stand, they seem like a united force, a two-headed serpent whispering promises of gold and glory into the ears of discontented soldiers. One evening, your grandmother summons you. She doesn't ask you about the temple rites or your sacred duties. She looks at you in a new way, her gaze analytical, appraising. She traces the line of your jaw with her finger. You look so much like him, she murmurs, her voice soft but laced with steel. She means Caracalla, your murdered cousin, the last of the great Severan dynasty. You don't see the resemblance, but that doesn't matter. All that matters is that other people can be convinced they see it. This is the heart of her grand gamble. It's not just about money. You can't just buy an empire. Not outright. You need a story. You need a claim. A justification that allows men to follow their greed while telling themselves they are fighting for justice. Your grandmother has the gold. She has found the disgruntled army. And now, looking at you, she has found her story. And you, the boy priest who only wanted to dance for his god, are about to become the main character in the most dangerous fiction she will ever write. The air in the temple no longer smells of incense. It smells of conspiracy, and for the first time, you feel a cold shiver of fear. A premonition that your life is no longer your own. You are now a symbol. A living, breathing piece of propaganda. The high priest is about to be retired. A new role has been written for you. The lie is simple, elegant, and earth-shattering. It's also a direct assault on your family's honor. But in the high-stakes game your grandmother is playing, honor is a luxury she cannot afford. She doesn't wait for the soldiers to come to her anymore. She takes the story to them, and you are its living, breathing proof. The plan, which had been a low hum of conspiracy in the temple's back rooms, is now spoken aloud to you. It's laid out one evening under the light of flickering oil lamps, the shadows dancing on the stone walls, making your grandmother and mother look like priestesses of a much darker, more ambitious faith. The story is this: you are not the son of your father, Varius Marcellus, a respectable senator who passed away some time ago. No, you are, they claim, the secret, illegitimate son of the late Emperor Caracalla. You stare at them. The words don't make sense. Caracalla was your mother's first cousin. The implication is shocking. A stain on your mother, Julia Soaemias, who sits beside your grandmother, her face set in a mask of determination. She doesn't look at you. She can't. This grand fabrication hinges on her willingness to sacrifice her own reputation for the sake of the family's ambition, for the sake of putting you on the throne. Your grandmother, Julia Maze, explains it with the cool logic of a general planning a campaign. Caracalla was beloved by the legions. He was a soldier's emperor, generous with their pay, always on the front lines. The current emperor, Mercurius, is not only a pay cutter, but also the man who murdered their hero. The soldiers are angry, but they need a legitimate reason to rebel, a banner to rally under. Your grandmother's story gives them one. They wouldn't just be fighting for money, they would be fighting to restore the rightful heir of the Sever and dynasty. They would be avenging their fallen leader. It's a masterpiece of political propaganda. And here's the truly strange part. A detail that makes the whole affair even more bizarre: the lie was made more believable by your mother's existing reputation. Roman historians, admittedly hostile sources, had already painted Julia Soaemias as a woman of loose morals. In a twisted way, her rumored promiscuity gave this outrageous claim a veneer of plausibility in the gossipy, cynical world of Roman politics. Your grandmother was weaponizing society's judgment against her own daughter to her advantage. The rumor is seeded carefully. It starts as a whisper in the barracks, passed from one legionary to another of a cheap wine. Have you seen the high priest, the boy in the temple, the spitting image of the divine Caracalla? Then comes the gold. Your grandmother's agents move through the camp, not just spreading rumors but distributing gifts, donations to the soldiers in the name of the lost son of Caracalla. Each coin that presses into a soldier's palm is a testament to the story's truth. Historians still debate how many of the soldiers genuinely believed this story. Was it a heartfelt conviction that you were the true heir, a flicker of loyalty to their dead emperor, or was it what's known as a convenient fictional lie everyone tacitly agrees to accept? Because it serves their own self-interest, the truth probably lies somewhere in the middle. The story gave them the moral cover they needed, while your grandmother's fortune gave them the tangible reward they craved. Belief is a powerful force, but belief backed by a hefty bonus is even better. To cement the fiction, your name has changed. You are no longer Varius Save-Itus Bassianus. That boy is gone, erased. You are now to be called Marcus Aurelius Saturnians, the very name Caracalla himself used. It's a powerful piece of branding. Every time someone uses your new name, the lie becomes a little more real. You are paraded before key officers. They look at you, squinting, searching your teenage face for the features of a battle-hardened emperor in his late 20s. They nod slowly. Yes, I see the resemblance. Do they or do they see the mountain of gold standing behind you in the form of your grandmother? It doesn't matter. They agree. The lie has been accepted. You retreat to your chambers in the temple, the smell of incense now feeling faint. The memory of a simpler life. You look at your reflection in a polished bronze mirror. You try to see Caracola. You try to see an emperor. All you see is a confused boy. You whisper your new name to the silence. Marcus Aurelius Antoninus. It feels strange in your mouth. A costume you are being forced to wear. But the costume is being tailored. The stage is being set. And you are about to be pushed into the spotlight, whether you are ready or not. The night your life changes forever is dark and moonless. There is no grand ceremony, no public declaration. Power shifts in the dead of night. In a rush of adrenaline and whispered commands. On the night of May 16th, in the year 218, your grandmother decides it is time. The seeds of rebellion have been sown. The gold has been distributed. The story has taken root. It's time to harvest. You are woken while it's still dark. Your mother and grandmother spirit you out of the temple, not in your priestly silks, but in clothes more befitting a Roman youth. The air is cool and carries a sense of electric anticipation. Under the cover of darkness, you are smuggled into the military camp of the 3rd Gallic Legion at Roffa Nea. It's a stark, functional place, all leather, wood, and packed earth. It smells of sweat and metal. Unwelled away from the perfumed air of your temple, you are led to the center of the camp, where the Legion standards are kept. Torches have been lit, casting long, dancing shadows. The soldiers are being roused from their bunk, grumbling and confused, grabbing their gear. They assemble in the open space, their faces illuminated by the flickering torchlight, a sea of suspicion and curiosity. Then, you are lifted onto a platform. You stand there, a boy of 14, blinking in the sudden light, facing thousands of hardened soldiers. Your grandmother, Julia Maizet, stands beside you. She does not need to shout. Her voice, clear and commanding, cuts through the night air. She presents you, her grandson, not as a priest, but as the son of their beloved Caracola. She reminds them of their murdered emperor, of their club play, of the disrespect shown to them by the usurper Macarianus. And then, she renews her promise: vast, unimaginable wealth for every man who swears allegiance to you, the rightful heir. The commander of the Legion, a man named Nys, who was also a member of your grandmother's household, draws his sword. He is the first to proclaim you emperor. He kneels, and other officers, all part of the conspiracy, follow suit. For a moment, there is silence. The rank-and-file soldiers stare, weighing the scene. A boy, a wild story, a plate of gold. It could all go wrong in an instant. A single dissenting voice could shatter the illusion. This is the moment of truth. And what tips the balance isn't just the story or the goal. It's your appearance. In the dramatic, flickering torchlight. Your youth, your exotic priestly background, and the seven family features that your grandmother insisted you had. Create a powerful, almost mystical image. You look nothing like the boring, middle-aged bureaucrat Macarianus. You look like a divine sign, a fresh start. You look like destiny. A lone voice from the crowd shouts your new name, Imperator Marcus Aurelius Antoninus. Then another, and another. It builds into a roar, a cascade of sound that shakes the very ground you stand on. The soldiers raise their swords, the torchlight glinting off 1,000 metal blades. They are not just accepting you, they are acclaiming you. In that moment, in a military camp in Syria, you have become an emperor. It's a military coup, pure and simple. But being proclaimed emperor by one legion is one thing, being accepted by the empire is another. Macarianus is still the official emperor. and he has loyal armies. When he hears the news, he first scoffs, dismissing it as a minor disturbance led by a deluded boy. He doesn't grasp the danger until it's too late. He sends a force to quash the rebellion. But your grandmother's gold has already done its work. The attacking soldiers, upon seeing you and hearing the promises of wealth, kill their own officers and defect to your side. The final confrontation happens a few weeks later. At the Battle of Antioch, you are there, present on the battlefield, though it is highly unlikely you did any actual fighting. The details of the battle are murky, a point of confusion for historians. Some sources claim that when your army started to waver, your mother and grandmother rode into the thick of it, rallying the troops with frantic, desperate courage, shaming them into fighting on. Other accounts place the credit squarely on the commander in NYS. What's certain is that your presence was a potent symbol. The forces of Macarianus are defeated. He shaves his beard, disguises himself as a courier, and tries to flee. But he is captured and executed. His son, Diadumenion, whom he had named as his co-emperor, meets the same fate. Just like that. It's over. The gamble has paid off. You, the boy priest from Emesa, are now the undisputed master of the Roman world. The news ripples across the empire. A 14-year-old high priest of an obscure Syrian sun god is the new emperor. In Rome, the Senate, ever pragmatic, has no choice but to officially recognize you. They've probably never even heard of your god. They have no idea it's coming. As you stand in the aftermath of the battle, the dust settling around you, you are no longer a pawn in your grandmother's game. You hold the ultimate power. The question that hangs in the air, unspoken, is what on earth will you do with it? You don't trust to Rome. The heart of your new empire can wait. First, you have to introduce yourself to your subjects, and you decide to do it in a way that is quintessentially you. You can't be there in person, so you do the next best thing. You commission an official portrait to be painted and sent ahead to be displayed in the Senate House. This is standard practice. A new emperor sends his image to the Curia, where it is hung alongside the portraits of his predecessors Augustus, Trajan, Marcus Aurelius. It's a symbolic gesture of joining a long line of Roman greatness. But the painting you send is not standard practice at all. When the crate arrives in Rome and is opened before the assembled senators, a collective, stunned silence falls over the chamber. They were expecting a portrait of a Roman leader, a young man, perhaps, but one depicted in a traditional way with a stern, dignified expression, short Roman-style hair, and perhaps wearing armor or a simple toga. This was the visual language of power they understood. What they see instead is a splash of vibrant, unapologetic color that seems to mock the drab, solemn whole. Your portrait shows you not as a Roman general or statesman, but as a Syrian priest. You are depicted in your full ceremonial regalia, heavy silks of purple and gold, embroidered with intricate patterns. Your eyes are heavily lined with black coal. Your cheeks are rosy, and on your heads it's not a laurel wreath, but a tall, jewel-encrusted tiara. You stand not in a pose of military command, but in the act of worship, dancing before a conical black stone, your god, Elagabalus. This isn't just a portrait, it's a declaration. It's a manifesto. You are not telling the Roman elite, I will be one of you. You are telling them, you will all become one of me. You are signaling that the religious and cultural center of the empire is shifting from the Capitoline Hill in Rome to the temple of a sun god in Syria. You are placing your priesthood ahead of your imperial duties. To you, this is only natural. Being the high priest of Elagabalus is your primary identity. Being the emperor of Rome is just a new, more powerful extension of that role. For the senators, this is deeply troubling. The painting is a profound culture shock. Roman masculinity was built on ideals of discipline, austerity, and martial virtue gravitas. Your portrait, with its makeup, lavish jewelry, and oriental splendor, is the antithesis of everything a Roman leader was supposed to be. It's effeminate, it's foreign, it's decadent. and it is hanging right next to the stern, bearded face of Marcus Aurelius. The contrast couldn't be more jarring. Some historians argue this was a calculated move, a deliberate challenge to the old god. Others suggest it was simply supreme naivete, the act of a teenager who had no concept of Roman sensibilities and saw no reason to conform to them. What did Roman tradition mean to a boy who had spent his entire life in a Syrian temple? The truth is likely a mix of both. You probably didn't fully grasp how offensive the portrait would be, but you also likely didn't care. The senators are trapped. They cannot refuse to display the portrait of the new emperor. That would be an act of treason, so they hang it. And every day, as they enter the Senate House to debate the affairs of the empire, they are greeted by the image of their new ruler, a bejeweled teenage priest, dancing for a foreign rock. It's a silent, daily reminder that the Rome they knew is gone. This one act creates a chasm of mistrust and misunderstanding between you and the Roman establishment before you've even set foot in the city. They now see you not as a liberator who freed them from the tyrant Macarianos, but as a strange and unpredictable new problem. They are whispering, "Who is this boy? What does he want?" The most worrying question of all is about the strange black stone in the painting. They soon find out that it's not just a symbol, it's coming to Rome, and you've already started making plans for its arrival. Your god cannot be left behind. While your portrait is causing a quiet panic in the Roman Senate, you are busy organizing the most important journey of your life. Not your journey to Rome, but your god's. You are arranging for the sacred black stone of Emesa, the physical manifestation of the deity Elagabalus, to be transported from its ancient temple in Syria all the way to the capital of the empire. This isn't just moving a religious artifact, it's a state-sponsored theological relocation. The logistics of this undertaking are immense. This is no small pebble. Ancient sources describe it as a large, conical meteorite, dark and heavy. It is revered as a piece of the heavens, and it must be treated as such. A special chariot is constructed for it, more like a mobile shrine than a transport vehicle. It's adorned with gold and silver, draped in the finest fabrics, but there are no reins. You decree that the chariot must not be pulled by horses in the normal fashion, as this would be an indignity to the god. Instead, you yourself will walk backwards in front of the chariot for much of the journey, your eyes fixed on the stone, guiding a team of pure white horses that are harnessed behind it, effectively pushing it. Imagine the scene. A grand procession slowly making its way across the provinces of the east, then through Asia Minor, across the Hellespont, and through the Balkans towards Italy. It's a journey of thousands of miles. At the head of this procession is you, the emperor of the Roman world, walking backwards, dressed in your priestly silks, your gaze locked in devotion. You are a living spectacle. For the people of the provinces you pass through, this is a mind-boggling sight. They are used to seeing emperors as distant, powerful figures. They've never seen one acting as the personal attendant to a rock. The procession is slow, deliberate, and incredibly expensive. It's a constant religious ceremony on the move. Incense burns day and night. Chants and music, foreign to Roman ears, fill the air. Sacrifices are made at stops along the way. You are essentially forcing the entire imperial machinery to revolve around this slow-moving piece of stone. Administrative matters, military reports, urgent dispatches from across the empire, they all have to find their way to this traveling religious festival. Historians have long debated the exact nature of the Elagabalus stone. Was it truly a meteorite? Modern scholars find this plausible. The worship of Banquets, or sacred stones, often meteorites, was common in the ancient Near East. These objects, having fallen from the sky, were seen as direct links to the divine. If it was a meteorite, its journey was not just symbolic, it was the physical transfer of a celestial power from the east to the west. A curious footnote to this is that even today, in the city of Hom's ancient Emesa, there are local legends and historical accounts of this sacred stone, though its ultimate fate is a mystery. Its memory lingers in its place of origin. Your grandmother, Julia Maizet, watches this all with growing concern. Her grand plan was to restore the Severan dynasty, to place her family back at the center of Roman power. She understood the need for the story of you being Caracalla son. She did not, however, sign up for a theological revolution. She is a pragmatist. She knows how Romans think. She understands that while they could be tolerant of foreign gods, they would never accept one of them replacing Jupiter Optimus Maximus, the best and greatest, the divine protector of Rome itself. She tries to advise you. Perhaps tone it down a bit. Be an emperor first, a priest second, at least until we get to Rome. But you are not listening. You are a teenager with absolute power, convinced of your own divine mission, who needs the advice of their grandmother when a god is your co-pilot. You see her pragmatism as a lack of faith. You see her political concerns as irrelevant. The god chose you. The god made you emperor. Therefore, the empire must now serve the god. The logic, in your mind, is flawless. As the procession inches closer to Italy, the reports arriving in Rome become more and more alarming. It's not just a new emperor who is coming. It's a new god, and HES bringing his rock with him. The senators, the priests of the traditional Roman cults, the common people, they are all bracing for an arrival that feels less like the homecoming of a ruler and more like an alien invasion. The stage is set for a cultural and religious collision of epic proportions. After more than a year of slow, ritualistic travel, you finally arrive at the gates of Rome. The year is 219. The city has been waiting, simmering in a stew of anticipation and anxiety. They have seen your portrait. They have heard the wild stories of your procession. Now, they get to see you in the flesh, and you do not disappoint their wildest expectations. Your entry into the city is not the traditional triumph of a Roman emperor. Their triumph was a military parade, celebrating a victory over a foreign enemy. You enter as a priest, celebrating the arrival of your god. The sacred black stone, Elagabalus, is the star of the show. It sits on its gilded chariot, while you walk before it, still in your flowing silk robes, your face painted, your eyes fixed on the deity, your family, your mother, Julia as Myers, and your grandmother, Julia Mays, ride in more conventional carriages. Your grandmother's face is a carefully composed mask of neutrality, but you can feel her unease. For the people of Rome lining the streets, this is a spectacle unlike any they have ever witnessed. They are used to seeing their emperors as figures of martial power and stoic dignity. They see you, a teenager adorned in what they consider to be outlandish and effeminate costume, leading a rock on a leash. The immediate reaction is likely one of bewilderment. Not anger, not yet. Just a profound, collective sense of what are we looking at. You are completely oblivious to their confusion, or perhaps you relish it. You are swept up in your own world, a bubble of divine purpose. You see the marble temples of the Forum, the vast curve of the Colosseum, not as monuments to Roman history, but as a new backdrop for your god. This is his new home now, your new home. You settle into the imperial palace on the Palatine Hill, a sprawling complex of luxury and power that has housed emperors from Augustus to your own cousin, Tranquil. But you don't adapt to the palace, you make the palace adapt to you. The state. Traditional Roman decor is immediately challenged. Syrian silks are draped over marble statues. The air, once smelling of old stone and power, is now thick with the scent of the exotic incense you burn for Elagabalus. Your behavior is just as jarring to the palace staff and the Roman elite who come to pay their respects. You greet stern-faced senators while wearing makeup and jewelry. You speak with a Syrian accent, your Latin peppered with words from your native tongue. Historians have debated whether this was a deliberate act of cultural defiance or simply the natural behavior of a boy who was, for all intents and purposes, a foreigner. Was it an in-your-face statement? Or were you just being yourself? Perhaps you didn't even see a distinction. You are the emperor. Therefore, how you acted was, by definition, the imperial way to act. A particularly strange and little-known habit you develop is your fascination with collecting spider bears. Yes, spider bears, Cassius Dio, a contemporary historian who served as a senator during your reign and witnessed your eccentricities firsthand, reports that you would command servants to collect vast quantities of cobwebs from around the city. You then presented the collected mass weighing pounds as proof of Rome's greatness. The logic behind this is utterly baffling. A true insight into a mind that worked on a different plane. It was one of the first signs for the Romans that your strangeness wasn't just about religion, it ran much, much deeper. Your grandmother, Julia Mazzei, works tirelessly behind the scenes to smooth things over. She meets with senators, assures them that you will adapt, that you are just young. She tries to manage the administration of the empire. The things you have no interest in: taxes, legions, grain supplies. She is the shadow empress, trying to hold the fabric of the state together while you, the actual emperor, are busy planning your god's new wardrobe. But her efforts are like trying to build a dam with sand. Every day, you do something new to shock and alienate the establishment. You ignore the traditional Roman gods completely. You show no interest in the Senate, other than as an audience for your religious performances. You have the ultimate power, but you misunderstand its source. You think it comes from your god. The Romans know it comes from a delicate balance of military loyalty, aristocratic support, and popular goodwill. You are actively setting fire to all three pillars, and you've only just arrived. The city watches, and waits, and whispers. The bewilderment is slowly, surely, starting to curdle into resentment. Now that you and your god are settled in Rome, you can't have him living in just any old temple. The existing Roman pantheon, with its hundreds of shrines and temples, is insufficient. Your god, the true supreme deity in your eyes, needs a new home. A bigger, better home. So you embark on your first great building project, the construction of the Elagabalus. You choose a prime piece of real estate on the northeast corner of the Palatine Hill, a location with a commanding view of the Roman Forum. This isn't some back alley shrine, this is a statement. The temple you build is lavish, opulent, and utterly un-Roman in its design. It's filled with the wealth you command as emperor, a treasure house for your deity. The most sacred objects from other Roman cults are forcibly moved there. You order the eternal flame of Vesta, the Palladium, a sacred statue of Pallas Athena, the shields of the Salian priests, and other revered relics to be transferred to the Elagabalus. Your logic, as you explain it to the horrified Roman priesthood, is one of religious consolidation. You declare that no other god should be worshipped in Rome except as a servant or aspect of Elagabalus. By bringing all their sacred objects into his temple, you are not destroying them, you are merely making them subordinate. You genuinely seem to believe this is a gesture of inclusive monotheism. To the Romans, it is the highest form of sacrilege. You are kidnapping their gods. The central object of worship in this grand new temple is, of course, the black stone. But your plan goes much further than just building a temple. You are attempting a complete rewrite of Roman religion. Your ultimate goal is to have Elagabalus, your sun god, officially replace Jupiter Optimus Maximus Jupiter, destined greatest as the head of the Roman pantheon. This is a theological earthquake. Jupiter wasn't just a god, he was the divine symbol of Roman power and identity, the protector of the state for 1,000 years. Suggesting he be demoted is like suggesting the American government replace the bald eagle with a different bird. It's unthinkable. You institute new festival, entirely centered around Elagabalus. These are not the solemn, dignified rituals the Romans are used to. They are vibrant, noisy, and to Roman eyes, chaotic. Till you, as high priest, led these ceremonies personally. You dance in your silk robes, to the sound of drums, cymbals, and flutes. The most distinguished senators and equestrians are required to attend these services, standing for hours in the sun, watching you perform. It's a humiliation for them, being forced to participate in what they see as a bizarre foreign spectacle. Historians are still trying to piece together the exact theology you were trying to implement. It seems to have been a form of syncretist, an attempt to blend different religious beliefs into one. But it was syncretist with a sledgehammer. You weren't gently merging traditions, you were declaring your tradition to be the only one that mattered. The academic debate continues while you are a genuine religious visionary, trying to create a more universal faith for a diverse empire, or were you simply a teenager imposing your hometown cult on your new subjects with no regard for their own beliefs? The surviving historical accounts, written by your enemies, paint you as the latter. They describe the rites as depraved and shocking, though they are often frustratingly vague on the details, leaving much to speculation. One of the more obscure and lesser-known aspects of your new religious order was the annual, elaborate ritual you established each year at the summer solstice. The black stone of Elagabalus was placed in a jeweled chariot and paraded from its Palatine temple to a second, even larger temple you built outside the city. The entire route was sprinkled with gold dust. You would run backwards ahead of the chariot, and the whole affair was a massive public holiday. It was you forcing your personal religious calendar onto the entire city. Your grandmother, Julia Maizay, is now in a state of quiet panic. She sees you dismantling the very foundations of Roman society. She had wanted you to be a Roman emperor of Syrian origin. Instead, you are a Syrian priest who happens to be wearing the emperor's crown. You are not building bridges, you are burning them. The resentment among the traditional priestly colleges and the conservative Roman elite is growing into a low, dangerous rumble. You have a new temple and a new god in the heart of Rome, but you are building it on a foundation of pure alienation. A supreme god, now housed in a magnificent new temple, needs a companion. In your mind, it's simply not right for the all-powerful Elagabalus to be a bachelor. He needs a wife, a divine consort to share his new Roman home. And so you begin one of the most surreal projects of your reign, divine matchmaking. Your first choice for your god's bride is Pallas Athena, the Greek goddess of wisdom, warfare, and crafts, known to the Romans as Minerva. But you can't just declare them married. You need a physical representation of the goddess. So you raid her most sacred temple in the Roman Forum and acquire the Palladium. This isn't just any statue. The Palladium was an ancient wooden effigy of Pallas Athena, believed to have been brought from Troy by the hero Aeneas himself. It was considered one of the most vital guarantors of Rome's safety and survival. Its home was in the Temple of Vesta, guarded by the Vestal Virgins, and it was said that as long as it remained secure, Rome could not fall. You burst into this sacred space, seize the ancient statue, and have it carried with great pomp to your Elagabalus on the Palatine Hill. You then announce the wedding. You declare that your sun god, a symbol of masculine power, is marrying the goddess of wisdom and war. It's a perfect match. You reason. Power and wisdom, united. The dowry for this celestial wedding is, of course, the entire treasury of Minerva's temple, which you promptly confiscate and transfer to your own. The Roman public is aghast. You haven't just disrespected a goddess, you have stolen the city's ultimate good luck charm and forced it into a marriage with a foreign rock. The priests of the traditional cults are beyond furious, but they are powerless to stop you. You are the emperor. However, the divine marriage doesn't seem to take. Perhaps the chemistry just isn't there. You decide, after some time, that Minerva is too warlike to face a bride for your sun god. The divine union is unceremoniously annulled. The Palladium, now tainted by its association with a foreign deity, is eventually returned, but the damage is done. So, you go looking for a new bride for Elagabalus. This time, you make a far more unusual choice. You turn your attention away from the traditional Greco-Roman pantheon and towards Carthage, in modern-day Tunisia. Your choice falls upon the goddess Tanit, the great celestial goddess of Carthage, whom the Romans had long ago syncretized with their own Juno Caelestis. This choice is bizarre for several reasons. First, it involves another act of religious appropriation. You order her cult statue to be brought all the way from Carthage to Rome. Once again, A sacred object is uprooted from its ancient home to serve your theological whims. Second, the historical context is deeply ironic. Rome and Carthage had been mortal enemies, fighting three massive, bloody wars known as the Punic Wars. For centuries, Carthage was Rome's ultimate nemesis. Now, you, the Roman emperor, are arranging a marriage between a Syrian god and a Carthaginian goddess in the heart of Rome. It's a complete scrambling of historical alliances and enmities. The wedding of Elagabalus, it is celebrated with even greater festivities than the first. You declare that the entire population of Rome should celebrate the nuptials. Feasts are held, and distributions of food and money are made to the public. You are essentially bribing the populace to celebrate an event they find deeply weird and offensive. Historians are still puzzled over the motivation for this second marriage. Was it a genuine, if eccentric, theological belief, or were you trying to create a new, unified pantheon for the entire Mediterranean, bridging the old rivalries of Rome and Carthage under the benevolent rule of your sun god, or was it simply the impulsive act of a teenager with a god complex, playing with deities as if they were dolls? This question of your sincerity versus insanity is a recurring theme in any study of your reign. This strange episode of the divine weddings is a perfect microcosm of your rule. It showcases your complete disregard for Roman tradition, your belief that all other religions were subordinate to your own, and your tendency to use the full power of the state to enact your personal, increasingly bizarre religious fantasies. While you were busy being a celestial wedding planner, the real-world problems of the empire, finances, border defense, political stability were being almost completely ignored. Your grandmother watches, her face etched with worry. The wedding celebrations feel less like a party and more like a feast on a sinking ship. It's one thing to command the Roman elite to attend your new festivals. It's another thing entirely to force them to watch you dance. As the high priest of Elagabalus, dancing is a core part of your worship. This is not the restrained, formal movement a Roman might associate with a religious rite. It's an ecstatic, whirling, and, to Roman eyes, wildly undignified performance, and you make it a Carmen performance. Several times a year, during the grand festivals for your god, you take center stage. Picture the scene: the Elagabalus is packed. The senators, in their formal togas, stand shoulder to shoulder with the wealthy knights of the equestrian order. These are powerful, serious men, governors, generals, judges, and aristocrats whose families have led Rome for generations. They have been ordered to attend, and attendance is not optional. In the center of it all is you, dressed in your most extravagant silk robes, your face painted, bells possibly tied to your garments. You begin to move. You dance around the high altar where the black stone of Elagabalus rests. The music is loud, driven by the percussive beat of drums and the high-pitched sounds of pipes and cymbals, sounds of the East that are jarring undaily to the Roman ear. You dance with abandon. You spin, you leap, your arms trace patterns in the air. This is the sacred dance you perfected as a boy in Emesa, a physical prayer to the sun god. To you, it is the highest form of devotion, a moment of divine communion. To the Roman senators forced to watch, it is the ultimate humiliation. The emperor, the man who is supposed to embody Roman gravitas and martial authority, is prancing around like a four-on-court entertainer. HistoryExtra, who was likely present at some of these events, describes the scene with undisguised horror. He notes that while you danced, the senators were expected to stand in a semicircle, like a chorus in a play. The most humiliating part for them was that they were also required to chant the god's name in unison along with the music, effectively becoming unwilling participants in the ritual. Imagine a gathering of the most powerful men in the Western world, being forced to clap along to a ceremony they despise, led by a teenager they see as a degenerate. This forced participation in your religious rites is a recurring theme. You don't just want their passive acceptance, you demand their active involvement. It's a test of loyalty that is also an act of submission. By making them watch your unmanly dance and chant your gods for a name, You are asserting your dominance over them in a deeply personal and cultural way. One of the more obscure and debated aspects of these ceremonies is the supposed presence of a women's chorus. Some sources suggest that alongside the senators, a choir of women from noble families was also required to be present, providing vocal accompaniment to your dancing. If true, this would have been another breach of Roman etiquette, mixing the sexes in a public religious performance in a way that was highly unconventional. The historical evidence for this is thin, making it one of those "did it really happen" details that scholars still argue about. It adds another layer of strangeness to an already bizarre picture. Your grandmother, Julia Mazzei, understands the damage this is causing. She can see the barely concealed contempt on the faces of the senators. She knows that every spin you make, every clang of the cymbals, further erodes the political capital she worked so hard to build. Power in Rome rested on a foundation of mutual respect between the emperor and the elite. You are systematically pulverizing that foundation, grinding it into dust with your dancing feet. You, however, are lost in the ecstasy of the moment. You feel the rhythm, the connection to your god. You see the powerful men of Rome standing before you and likely interpret their silent, stony-faced obedience as reverence. You don't see their simmering rage. You don't understand that for a Roman aristocrat, being forced to compromise their dignity is a graver insult than taking their money. You believe you are uniting the empire under a new, more vibrant faith. In reality, you are dancing your way toward disaster, and the beat of your drum is starting to sound like a countdown. Your religious revolution was shocking enough. Your personal life is about to detonate a scandal that will make the dancing and the divine weddings seem like minor eccentricities. You decide, like your god, that you too should get married. This is expected of an emperor. A marriage produces heirs, securing the dynasty. Your grandmother Julia Mazzei is thrilled. A proper Roman marriage to a noblewoman could be a huge political victory. It would normalize you, anchor you to the Roman aristocracy, and perhaps calm the storm you've created. She likely has a list of suitable candidates. You ignore her list. You have someone else in mind. A choice so outrageously and deliberately provocative it feels like a declaration of war on Roman values. You decide to marry a Vestal Virgin. Let's be clear about what this means. The Vestal Virgins were 6 priestesses who tended the sacred flame of Vesta, the goddess of the hearth, home, and family. They were the symbolic heart of Rome. They took a vow of chastity for 30 years. This vow was absolutely sacred. A Vestal who broke her vow was sentenced to a terrifying death, being buried alive in a subterranean chamber with a small amount of food and water. The man who violated her was flogged to death in public. The chastity of the Vestales was inextricably linked to the security and purity of the Roman state. Your chosen bride is Julia Aquilia Severa. You march to the Temple of Vesta, the very place you previously raided for the Palladium, and you take her. You justify this act with a piece of theological reasoning that is, even for you, breathtakingly arrogant. You, the high priest of the sun god, are marrying a priestess of Vesta. You announce that this is a sacred marriage, a holy union. It is fitting. You proclaim, not a priest should marry a priestess. You even suggest that from this divine union, godlike children would be born. The city is thrown into an uproar. This isn't just illegal, it's a profound act of sacrilege, a spiritual pollution of the city's most sacred institution. You have taken the living symbol of Roman purity and defiled her for your own personal whim. The fact that you are the Pontifex Maximus, the chief priest of Roman religion, and are committing this act makes it even more heinous. You are not just breaking the rules, you are gleefully setting the rulebook on fire. The marriage ceremony itself is a state affair. You, the emperor, marry the Vestal Virgin with all the pomp and circumstance you can muster. What did Aquilia Severa herself think of this history, written by men, is silent on her perspective? Was she a terrified victim, dragged from her sacred duties against her will, or was she, perhaps, An ambitious woman who saw an opportunity in the emperor's bizarre infatuation we will never know. She is a voiceless figure at the center of a massive scandal. This marriage is a turning point for many Romans, especially the conservative elite. This is the final straw. Your religious eccentricities were bad enough. This is a direct attack on the mos maiorum, the way of the ancestors, the unwritten constitution of Roman morality. Your grandmother is apoplectic. This is the exact opposite of the stabilizing marriage she had hoped for. It's an act of pure political self-destruction. Under immense pressure from her and other advisors, you are eventually persuaded to divorce Soqualia Severa. But the damage is done, and your marital adventures are far from over. After divorcing the Vestal, you enter into a flurry of other marriages. You marry a noblewoman named Annia Faustina, a descendant of the revered Emperor Marcus Aurelius. In what was likely a desperate attempt by your grandmother to forge a connection to the traditional aristocracy. But you quickly grow bored of her. Here's where it gets truly strange. You divorce Annia Faustina and then remarry the Vestal Virgin, Aqualia Severa, claiming you never should have left her. The exact number and sequence of your wives is a point of contention among ancient historians, a reflection of the chaos of your reign. Some sources say you had up to 5 wives in your 4 short years as emperor. This rapid cycle of marriage and divorce was itself scandalous in an era where marriage was a serious political and social contract. For you, it seems marriage was just another performance, another way to shop, another institution to subvert. You treated the sacred bonds of matrimony with the same impulsive, self-serving logic you applied to theology. The question of whether you were driven by genuine, albeit bizarre, affection for the Vestal, or by a nihilistic desire to shatter every Roman taboo, is a debate that continues to this day. What's certain is that with this one marriage, you cemented your reputation not just as an eccentric, but as a dangerous and sacrilegious tyrant, while your series of scandalous marriages to women shocked Rome. It was your relationships with men that truly defied all Roman comprehension. You didn't just have male lovers, which was common enough among the Roman elite. You shattered the established norms of how those relationships were supposed to function. In Rome, the rules were all about power and status. It was generally acceptable for a high-status man like an emperor to have a relationship with a lower-status male, like an enslaved person or a performer. As long as the emperor maintained the dominant, masculine rule, you flipped the script completely unpublicly. Your most significant relationship was with a man named Heracles. He wasn't a senator or a noble. He was a chariot driver, a sports celebrity from Caria with blonde hair and a handsome face. Charioteers were the superstars of their day, adored by the masses, but they were also considered infames. A low social class on par with actors and gladiators. You fell completely and utterly in love with him. But you didn't treat him as a subordinate lover. You elevated him to a position of unparalleled power. You delighted in calling Heracles your husband. You referred to yourself as his wife, his queen, and the mistress of Heracles. This was a public and deliberate inversion of the Roman power dynamic. For the emperor of Rome, the living embodiment of masculine authority, to gleefully take on the passive, feminine role in a relationship was unthinkable. It wasn't just a private preference, it was a public performance of gender subversion. You would rage if anyone showed Heracles less respect than they showed you. You allowed him to strike you, and according to the historian Cassius Dio, you even reveled in the black eyes he gave you. Seeing them as marks of affection from your manly husband, you tried to have Heracles officially declared Caesar, which would have made him your heir. But your long-suffering grandmother managed to block this particular move, realizing it would trigger an immediate revolt. Your marriage to Heracles was your most enduring relationship, but he wasn't your only male partner. You also had a relationship with a large, muscular athlete from Smyrna named Aurelius Theoticus. His fame was based on his impressive physique. You heard about him, summoned him to Rome, and appointed him to a high court position that was entirely ceremonial. Their first meeting, as described by ancient sources, is a scene of pure farce. You supposedly greeted Theotokos with a flourish, and upon seeing his celebrated physique, you swayed theatrically and said, "Call me lady, for I am undergoing a passion." You then married him at a lavish public ceremony in Rome. Theotokos was the groom, and you were the bride. The ceremony included a dowry and all the traditional rites. The city of Rome was forced to witness its emperor being given away in marriage to another man. The scandal was immense. The story of Theotokos has a strange and comical ending. However, the marriage didn't last long. Heracles, your first husband, became intensely jealous of the newcomer, fearing Theotokos' influence over you. Heracles allegedly conspired to have his rival's drink spiked with a potion that rendered him unable to perform his marital duties. When Theotokos failed to please you, you flew into a rage, stripped him of all his titles, and banished him from Italy. The whole episode reads less like imperial history and more like a high society drama. Historians are still trying to understand this aspect of your life. Were these relationships genuine expressions of your identity? Were you what we might today understand as transgender? Seeking to live as a woman, some sources claim you actively sought out physicians who could perform a form of gender confirmation surgery, offering them vast rewards, though the medical science of the time made this impossible. This interpretation has gained some traction in recent years, casting you as a figure of gender nonconformity struggling against the rigid norms of your time. Or was this all just the ultimate form of power play, the act of a supreme ruler who, having conquered the world, now sought to conquer the very laws of nature and society, proving that you could do anything you wanted, including being the wife of a charioteer? It could be that both are true. Perhaps it was a genuine expression of identity, amplified and distorted through the lens of absolute, unchecked power. Whatever the motivation, your public marriages to Heracles and Theotokos were the final, undeniable proof to the Roman world that their emperor was not just eccentric, but was actively dismantling every pillar of Roman identity, their religion, their traditions, and now, their very understanding of gender and power. The rumors that swirled out from the palace were even wilder than your public behavior, while the senators were horrified by your official acts. The common people of Rome were treated to a running commentary of gossip about what happened behind the closed doors of the Palatine Hill. According to the hostile ancient sources that document your reign, you didn't just subvert imperial dignity in public, you allegedly turned the imperial residence into a stage for your own private, scandalous performances. One of the most infamous stories is that you set up a tavern or brothel within the halls of the palace itself. This wasn't for financial gain, you were the emperor. You had all the money in the world. According to the historian Cassius Dio, this was a form of role-playing, another way to live out a life that was the complete opposite of a Roman emperor's. You would allegedly set aside a room in the palace, hang a curtain over the doorway, and stand behind it, just as sex workers did in the city's brothels. You would put on makeup, wear alluring clothing, and adopt a soft, feminine voice. You would then try to solicit customers from the palace staff and visitors, calling out to passers-by with pet names and promising them your services. It's described as a bizarre and unsettling piece of theater, with you, the master of the Roman world, mimicking the life of its most marginalized inhabitants. It's important to stress that these accounts are written by your enemies, senators who saw you as a monstrous aberration. They had every reason to exaggerate or even invent stories to discredit you. The image of the emperor acting as a prostitute from his own palace was the ultimate symbol of a world turned upside down, a perfect piece of anti-Elagabalus propaganda. However, even if the stories were embellished, they likely grew from a kernel of truth. Your fascination with transgressing social boundaries was undeniable. You took on the role of a priest, a bride, a wife. It's not a huge leap to imagine you also role-playing as someone from the lowest rungs of society. For you, it may have been the ultimate expression of freedom, the freedom to be anyone you wanted, to shed the crushing weight of being emperor and adopt any identity you pleased, even for a few hours. A lesser-known but equally strange rumor concerned your dining habits. Official Roman banquets were highly ritualized affairs, but your private meals were said to be performances of excess. You would allegedly only eat food that was all of the same color on a given day, all green foods one day, all blue foods the next. A difficult task in the ancient world, probably involving dyes. This obsession with aesthetic uniformity over taste or nutrition speaks to a mind that was highly theatrical and saw every aspect of life, even eating, as a potential or project. The line between fact and fiction in these palace tales is hopelessly blurred. A central problem for anyone studying your reign. Is the story of the palace brothel a literal truth, or is it a metaphor used by a hostile historian to say, he prostituted the honor of the empire? Historians continue to debate this. Some take the accounts of authors like Cassius, who was a contemporary witness, more or less at face value, arguing that while biased, he was reporting things he saw and heard. Others argue that these stories are so extreme, they must be treated as literary tropes, designed to paint a picture of the ultimate tyrant rather than to report facts, whether literally true or not. These stories spread like wildfire through the city. They painted a picture of an emperor who was not just religiously deviant, but personally depraved and mentally unstable. For the average Roman, these tales of palace antics were probably more compelling and easier to grasp than the complex sacrilege of marrying a Vestal virgin. They understood what a brothel was. The idea of the emperor running one in his own home was a simple, powerful, and deeply damning image. It helped to solidify the consensus, from the highest senator to the common man in the street, that you were not fit to rule. The palace, once the symbol of imperial stability, was now seen as the epicenter of madness. Your challenge to Roman norms wasn't just about who you married or how you worshipped. It extended to your own body and appearance, a daily, visible rejection of Roman ideals of masculinity. You treated your imperial person not as a symbol of stoic authority, but as a canvas for a radical form of self-expression. Your fascination with cosmetics was a constant source of scandal. While it wasn't unheard of for Roman men to use some subtle products, you took it to a level that was considered shocking and decadent. You would apply white lead and red ochre to your face, not just to enhance your features, but to create a stylized, mask-like appearance. Your eyes were always heavily lined with black coal, just as they had been when you were a priest in Emesa. This wasn't just makeup, it was your priestly vestment, worn every day. You also took to depth by lating your entire body, removing all hair to achieve a smooth, feminine skin. This practice, while not completely unknown, was associated in the Roman mind with decadence and the passive role in a relationship, which was anathema for an emperor. You, however, embraced it openly. Then there was your clothing. You almost completely abandoned the traditional Roman toga, the quintessential symbol of Roman citizenship and status. You found it drab, heavy, and unflattering. Instead, you exclusively wore the lavish, flowing silk robes of your priesthood. Silks were an expensive luxury item in Rome, imported from the East. Wearing them as your daily attire was seen as a sign of outrageous extravagance. Worse, in the Roman view, this soft, clinging nature of silk was considered unmanly, a fabric for women and effeminate foreigners. You didn't care. You loved the feel, the color, the way the fabric moved when you walked. Your obsession with your appearance went even further. You frequently wore wigs, experimenting with different hairstyles, often those worn by women. You would adorn yourself with an astonishing amount of jewelry, rings on every finger, necklaces, bracelets, and even jeweled slippers. You effectively adopted a form of what we might call drag, blurring the lines between male and female presentation in a way that was deeply unsettling to the Roman establishment. This public presentation is one of the key reasons why modern scholars have revisited your story through the lens of gender identity. Your actions go far beyond simple eccentricity. They point to a consistent and deliberate performance of femininity. The historian Cassius Dio, never one to mince words, flatly states that you wanted to be a woman. He reports that you would ask your physicians if they could surgically alter your body, offering them immense fortunes for the procedure. while DL presents this as the ultimate proof of your insanity. A modern reader might see it as a desperate plea from someone experiencing profound gender dysphoria in an era that had no language or concept for it. Of course, the academic debate on this is fierce. Are we projecting modern concepts of gender identity onto a historical figure from a completely different culture, or are we finally recognizing a truth that was recorded at the time? Even if it was framed as madness by a hostile observer, there is no easy answer. This tension between historical context and modern interpretation is what makes you such a fascinating and controversial figure. A little-known detail that adds another layer to this is your reported interest in the technical aspects of women's fashion. You didn't just wear women's clothes, you were interested in how they were made. It's said you would spend hours with weavers and clothing makers, discussing fabrics and dyes. You were not just a consumer of fashion, you were a student of it. To the Romans, this was all of a piece. The foreign god, the scandalous marriages, the makeup, the silks, the wigs, it was all part of the same package, a complete and total rejection of what it meant to be a Roman man. And therefore, a Roman emperor. Every morning when you got dressed, you were putting on armor for a cultural war. You stepped out of your chambers not as Marcus Aurelius Antoninus, the emperor, but as the living, breathing embodiment of everything the Roman elite feared and despised. Your very presence was a provocation. Your sense of humor was as unconventional and unsettling as your religion and your fashion sense. You delighted in practical jokes, but your pranks were not the harmless fun of a typical teenager. They were amplified by your absolute power and laced with a streak of casual cruelty, designed to unnerve and humiliate the Roman aristocracy you seemed to despise. Your banquets became legendary, not for their fine food, but for the psychological terror you inflicted on your guests. The most famous of these deadly pranks is the story of the flower petals. You hosted a lavish banquet in a room with a specially designed reversible ceiling. Your guests, a collection of important senators and nobles, were reclining on their couches, likely already on edge, wondering what strange new protocol you would introduce. At the climax of the feast, you gave a signal, panels in the ceiling opened, and a gentle cascade of rose petals began to drift down upon the diners. At first, it must have seemed like a beautiful, decadent gesture, a shower of fragrant blossoms. But the petals kept coming. The gentle shower became a deluge. The air grew thick and heavy with the scent. The piles of petals on the floor grew deeper, rising from ankles to knees. Panic began to set in. The guests, weighed down by the sheer volume and density of the flowers, found it difficult to move. Some, overcome by the suffocating perfume and the physical weight of the petals, were unable to struggle free. According to the story, several of your guests suffocated to death, buried alive under a mountain of flowers. Did this really happen? The story comes from the Historia Augusta, a late Roman collection of imperial biographies that is notorious for its love of sensationalism and fabrication. Many modern historians are highly skeptical. It sounds more like a moralizing fable than a factual account, a poetic metaphor for how your decadent offness was. In fact, deadly. The logistics of releasing enough petals to actually suffocate people are also highly questionable. And yet, the story persists. A perfect encapsulation of your perceived character, an aesthete whose idea of beauty was so extreme it became lethal. Whether fact or fiction, the tale of the fatal flower shower became part of your legend. You had other, less lethal but equally bizarre, party tricks. You would have your guests recline on inflatable cushions halfway through the meal. You would have the air released, sending the dignified nobles tumbling unceremoniously to the floor while you roared with laughter. You took pleasure in serving your guests mock food made of glass, ivory, or stone, beautifully crafted to look like real dishes. A guest might bite into what looked like a delicious piece of fruit, only to nearly break a tooth on a piece of painted marble. You also loved creating social chaos. You would invite 8 bald men to a dinner party, or 8 one-eyed men, or 8 men who were excessively overweight. Your goal was simply to create a spectacle, to turn your guests into a collection for your own amusement. Another favorite prank was to seat your most important guests in one room for a fine meal, while seating guests of lower status in an adjacent room with identical looking but vastly inferior food and watered down wine, just to highlight the social distinctions you could manipulate at will. One of the more obscure pranks involved the lottery you held at your parties. Guests would be given tickets for a prize draw. The prizes, however, were wildly unpredictable. One guest might win £10 of gold. The next might win 10 dead flies. Other prizes included things like 100 bears, a single frog, or the deed to a country estate. The sheer randomness was the point. It was a demonstration of your power to give and take, to elevate and humiliate, or to whim. The uncertainty kept everyone on edge. These pranks were not about building camaraderie, they were about demonstrating power. They were a way for you to constantly remind the Roman elite that their dignity, their comfort, and even their lives were subject to your unpredictable whims. You were the ultimate puppet master, and they were your playthings. Each bizarre banquet further poisoned the atmosphere at court, replacing the traditional respect for the emperor with a deep-seated fear and a burning resentment. They came to your parties not knowing if they would leave with a fortune or as the butt of a cruel joke. This was no way to run an empire. Your mischievous streak wasn't confined to trick cushions and fake food. You had a particular fondness for using live animals in your pranks, turning your palace and dinner parties into a kind of chaotic, unpredictable zoo. Your goal, as always, was to provoke a reaction, to shatter the stuffy composure of the Roman elite and watch them squirm. One of your favorite gags was releasing snakes at your own spectacles and banquets. Now, you weren't trying to actually harm your guests. The historical accounts are clear that you used harmless, non-venomous snakes. You would have baskets and urns filled with them and, at a chosen moment, have them unleashed among the crowds or the dinner guests. The ensuing chaos was, to you, hilarious. Imagine a solemn public festival or a formal dinner. People are focused on the ceremony or their meal. Suddenly, from under the tables, from behind the curtains, a writhing mass of serpents appears. The reaction is instantaneous panic. Dignified senators, who would face down the barbarian horde without flinching, shriek and leap onto their couches. People trip over each other trying to flee. The entire event descends into mayhem, and you would sit back and watch the pandemonium with immense satisfaction. This prank worked on multiple levels. On the surface, it was simple slapstick making important people jump. But snakes also held a complex place in the Roman psyche. They were associated with various deities, both benevolent and dangerous, and were often seen as the Noi, creatures of the underworld. Unleashing them in a crowd was not just a physical disruption, it was a psychological one. A jarring reminder of the wild and the uncanny breaking into the orderly world of the city. Your animal-related pranks went beyond snakes. You reportedly enjoyed harnessing teams of exotic and inappropriate animals to your chariots. Instead of horses, you would try to yoke together for massive stags. On another occasion, you were seen in a chariot pulled by lions. Another time, you used tigers, calling yourself Bacchus, the god of wine, who was often depicted in a chariot drawn by big cats. These were not just joyrides. They were public spectacles, carefully staged performances. How much of this is exaggeration is, as always, up for debate. Training lions or tigers to pull a chariot would be an incredibly difficult and dangerous feat. Some historians suggest you might have used tamed, defanged animals for a short, controlled procession, or that the stories were entirely invented to make you seem both mad and godlike in your ambitions. Yet, the consistency of these tales across different sources suggests there's probably a kernel of truth there, a public display of your mastery over nature, a way of saying, even the wildest beasts obey me. A lesser known, and perhaps more cruel, animal prank involved your sleeping arrangements. It is said that you would sometimes have a guest who had had too much to drink carried from the banquet hall and placed in a locked room. When the unfortunate man woke up, groggy and hungover, he would find himself not in a comfortable guest bed, But on the floor with a live bear, a leopard, and a lion. The animals were, of course, tamed and harmless, toothless and playful as one source puts it. But the initial moment of sheer terror for the hungover guest, waking up face to face with a predator, must have been overwhelming. This was your idea of a morning after joke. These actions were utterly alien to the Roman concept of an emperor. Previous emperors had presided over grand animal hunts for Nation S in the Colosseum, where beasts were slaughtered as a display of Roman power over the natural world. Your approach was different. You weren't interested in conquering the animals, you were interested in using them as props in your personal theater of the absurd. You were blurring the line between the wild and the civilized, the palace and the menagerie. For the Roman elite, it was yet another sign that the world had been turned upside down. Their ruler was not a sober, predictable statesman. He was a prankster, a showman, a usurper who saw them as just another part of his collection, to be prodded and provoked for his own amusement. The fear they felt wasn't just of physical harm, but of unpredictable, relentless humiliation. Your subversion of Roman institutions wasn't limited to the male-dominated worlds of religion and politics. You also decided to meddle with the traditional roles of women, but in a way that even your most ardent feminist apologist would struggle to defend. You created what came to be known as the Women's Senate. This wasn't a genuine effort to give women political power. It was a parody, a mockery of the actual Roman Senate which you held in such contempt. You established this assembly on the Queer in El Hill, one of the 7 hills of Rome. Your mother, the ever-present Julia Soiamias, was installed as its presiding officer. The members were a collection of noble women from the city's most prominent families. But what did this Senate debate? Not matters of state, taxation, or military campaigns. Their official remit, as decreed by you, was to regulate matters of fashion and etiquette for Roman matrons. The Senatus Mulierum, as it was derisively called, would issue formal decrees on profoundly important topics. For example, they would legislate what kind of clothing a woman could wear based on her social rank. They would rule on which type of chariot she was permitted to use, what kind of jewelry was appropriate for which occasion, and even who had the right of way when two noble women's carriages met on a narrow street. They also spent a great deal of time debating hairstyles and the use of wigs, a subject of personal fascination for you. Complex rules were laid down, creating a rigid hierarchy of style. It was a breathtakingly trivial pursuit, a legislative body dedicated to enforcing the kind of social minutiae usually governed by unwritten custom. On one level, you can see this as another of your elaborate pranks. You were creating a parallel institution that mirrored the real Senate but dealt with feminine concerns, thereby implicitly mocking the masculine gravity of the actual senators' debates. You were essentially saying, your debates about provincial boundaries are no more important than my mother's debates about hairpins. It was a calculated insult, a way of demeaning the institution that represented the Roman aristocracy. However, the historical interpretation is, as always, complex. Some historians wonder if there was more to it. Was this, perhaps, an attempt by your mother and grandmother to create a formal power structure for themselves, a way to exercise their very real influence in a public, institutional setting? Julia Maesai and Julia Soiamias were, after all, the true powers behind the throne in many respects. Perhaps this women's senate was an experiment in formalizing female political power that you, in your typical fashion, framed in the most frivolous way possible. The debate continues as to whether this was purely a farce or a deeply flawed, but real, attempt to create a new space for women in public life. One of the more obscure and funny details to come out of the records of this Senate is the level of detail in their supposed decrees. They didn't just say noble women can wear silk. They would issue rulings on specific embroidery patterns, the appropriate weight of gold for an earring, and the types of leather permitted for different classes of women's shoes. It was micromanagement on a cosmetic level. For the traditional Roman elite, this was just another example of your madness. You were wasting state resources and time on a frivolous assembly while ignoring the real Senate. You were elevating your mother to a position of public authority that no Roman woman had ever held before, allowing her to preside over an official body. It was a perversion of the natural order. And for the women who were forced to participate, we can only imagine. Some may have relished the opportunity for public prominence, a chance to be at the center of court life. Others were likely terrified, forced to participate in a charade they knew was angering their husbands and fathers. The powerful men of the real Senate. They were pawns in your game. Used to poke at the hornet's nest of Roman tradition, the women's Senate. Far from being a step forward for female empowerment, was just another tool you used to destabilize and ridicule the world you now rule. It was a joke, but like all your jokes, it had a sharp and dangerous edge. Your approach to governing the empire was just as chaotic and unconventional as your personal life. When it came to appointing the most powerful officials in the Roman world, governors, financial procurators, even the prefect of the Praetorian Guard, you threw the traditional criteria out the window. Merit, experience, and noble birth, the cornerstones of the Roman civil service, meant nothing to you. You had your own, very peculiar standards. According to the historian Herodian, you believed that the size of a man's sexual organ was the primary qualification for high office. You would allegedly hold interviews where candidates for important administrative posts were judged not on their policy proposals or their military record, but on their physical endowments. Men were promoted to lead legions and govern provinces based on this single, bizarre criterion. This story is so outrageous that it's one of the most hotly debated points of your reign. Is it literally true, or is it a crude, slanderous metaphor used by your enemies to express the ultimate insult that you ran the empire with the logic of a brothel owner? The Historia Augusta doubles down on this, claiming you appointed a man as prefect of the city watch because he was a triple-jointed contortionist. The message is clear: your court was a circus, and the officials were clowns you selected for their amusing physical peculiarities. Whether literally true or not, it reflects a deeper reality. You consistently promoted your favorites, your lovers, and your cronies to the highest positions of power, regardless of their qualifications. Your husband, the charioteer Heracles, was given immense informal power, influencing imperial policy and controlling access to you. The emperor, your mother's lover, a man named Cormazion, who had been a dancer and actor, was made prefect of the Praetorian Guard, the commander of the emperor's elite bodyguards and one of the most powerful men in Rome. He was later made city prefect and even served as consul 3 times alongside you, an unprecedented honor for someone of his low-born background. You filled the Senate with your allies, many of whom were from Syria or had no standing in traditional Roman society. You sold public offices, a practice that was seen as deeply corrupt. You placed barbers, dancers, and chariot drivers in positions of trust and authority. This wasn't just cronyism, it was a systematic dismantling of the aristocratic power structure. You were replacing the old guard with a new one, drawn not from the traditional senatorial families, but from your own inner circle of confidantes and lovers. One of the more subtle but telling examples of your disregard for tradition was your treatment of the consulship. The position of consul was the highest honor in the Roman state. It had a long and venerable history stretching back to the founding of the Republic. While emperors often held the office themselves, it was also used to honor the most distinguished men of the Senate. You treated it as a personal plaything. You held the consulship multiple times in your short reign, often with inappropriate partners like Cormazion. At one point, you even dismissed a legally appointed consul mid-term for no apparent reason, simply to install a candidate of your own choosing. This was a direct slap in the face to the Senate and its tradition. This method of governing had disastrous consequences. The administration of the empire began to falter. Experienced governors were replaced by incompetent favorites. The judicial system became corrupt. The military leadership was compromised. While you were busy with your religious ceremonies and your scandalous parties, the actual machinery of the state was being clogged with unqualified people loyal only to you. Your grandmother, Julia Mazzei, was beside herself. She was a master of the traditional system. She understood how to pull the levers of power, how to balance the interests of the army, the Senate, and the people. You had handed her the ultimate prize, the throne. Now, you were taking the sledgehammer to the very machine she had captured. Her advice was ignored. Her carefully selected candidates were passed over for some new favorite of yours. She was watching her grand dynastic project crumble into chaos, destroyed from within by the very person she had placed at its center. Her patience was running out. The foundations of your power were rotting away, and soon, she would be forced to make a choice. Your grandmother, Julia Maizet, is no fool. She is the architect of your rise, and she is about to become the architect of your fall. She has watched your reign descend from a risky political gamble into a full-blown Category 5 disaster. You have alienated the Senate. You have horrified the public. And most dangerously, you have begun to lose the respect of the army, the very foundation of your power. The soldiers may have put you on the throne for gold, but even they have their limits. They are Roman soldiers, and they are embarrassed by an emperor who dresses in silk, calls a charioteer his husband, and forces them to worship a rock. Julia Maizet realizes you are a lost cause. You are uncontrollable. Your eccentricities have hardened into a pattern of behavior that is actively destroying the Severan dynasty she fought so hard to restore. But she is not the type to simply give up. If her star player is a liability, she will substitute him. She needs a new candidate, a backup plan. She needs a plan B. And she has one, waiting in the wings. Your cousin, a boy just a few years younger than you, named Bas Alexianos. He is the son of your aunt, Julia Mama Ia. In every way that you are shocking and alien. Alexianos is reassuringly conventional. While you were raised in the temple of Elagabalus in Syria, he has been given a proper, traditional Roman education under the watchful eye of his mother. Your aunt, Julia Mama Ia, is a very different woman from your mother, the flamboyant Julia S. Though A.A. Mama Ia is disciplined, intelligent, and deeply respected. She has carefully crafted her son's public image to be the complete antithesis of yours, while you are seen dancing in public. Alexianos is seen studying with his tutors, while you are associated with 4 ungods and scandalous lovers. He is presented as a pious, clean-living Roman youth who respects the traditions of the ancestors. He is, in short, the perfect anti-Elagabalus. Julia Maizet, the grand matriarch, shifts her focus. She begins to subtly promote her other grandson. She convinces you, in a rare moment of you actually taking her advice, that you need to formally adopt your cousin as your son and heir. Her argument is clever and plays to your vanity. She tells you that by adopting Alexianos, you can delegate the boring, mundane tasks of imperial administration, the things you hate, like meeting with senators and reviewing troop deployments. This will free you up, she argues, to focus on what you truly love, your divine, priestly duties. You fall for it. The idea of overdying the tedious emperor part of your job so you can be a full-time high priest is immensely appealing. In a public ceremony, you formally adopt your cousin. You give him the prestigious name of Alexander. From now on, he is known as Severus Alexander. He is now officially your son and designated Caesar, your heir apparent. This is a brilliant political move by your grandmother. It immediately reassures the nervous Roman establishment. They now have an alternative. They see a future for the empire that doesn't involve flower petal suffocation or snake-filled banquets. The Senate breathes a collective sigh of relief. They begin to shower the young Alexander with honors, seeing him as their potential savior. The Praetorian Guard, the elite soldiers stationed in Rome, also take notice. Their commander, the unqualified dancer Cormazion, is your man, but the loyalty of the common soldiers is wavering. They see in Alexander a boy who looks on Dax like a future emperor they can respect. They see a return to normalcy. A quiet but intense rivalry begins to brew within the palace, a tale of two cousins. On one side is you, the incumbent emperor, increasingly isolated with your small circle of favorites, lost in your own world of religious fantasy. On the other side is Alexander, the rising star, backed by his shrewd mother, Julia Mama Dar, and the immense political cunning of their shared matriarch, your grandmother, Julia may say. You have unknowingly signed your own political death warrant. By elevating Alexander, you have given all your opponents the Senate, the army, even your own family a rallying point. You've created a legitimate, officially sanctioned replacement. Your grandmother's plan B is now in motion, and it is gathering momentum with terrifying speed. You thought you were getting an assistant. What you actually got was your executioner. You start to notice the shift almost immediately. The assistant you thought you were getting is rapidly becoming more popular than you are. The plan to offload your boring duties backfires spectacularly. Every time your cousin, Severus Alexander, performs a public duty, he does it with a sober dignity that highlights your own eccentricities. He appears before the Senate and speaks to them respectfully. They love him for it. He visits the military barracks and speaks with the soldiers about martial valor, not about the proper way to dance for his sun god. They adore him. The people of Rome see him in the streets, dressed in a simple toga, looking every bit the part of a traditional Roman nobleman. He is everything you are not, and the contrast is devastating for your reputation. You see the way the senators' eyes light up when Alexander enters a room. You hear the cheers from the Praetorian Guard whenever he inspects them. The stream of petitioners and officials that once flowed to your chambers now diverts to the part of the palace where Alexander and his mother, Julia Monarchiae, reside. They are becoming the new center of gravity at court. Jealousy, sharp and bitter, begins to consume you. You realize you've been tricked. Your grandmother didn't give you an assistant to help with your divine work, she gave you a rival to placate your enemies. You regret the adoption. You regret giving him the name Alexander, a name that resonates with power and greatness. You see the adoration he receives, and you recognize it as the love and respect that you have never been able to command. Your paranoia spirals. You become convinced that Alexander and his mother are actively plotting against you. You see conspiracies in every shadow. You try to reverse course. You start to strip Alexander of the titles you gave him. You forbid senators from visiting him. You put his friends and tutors under surveillance. And some are arrested or even executed on trumped-up charges. But these actions only make you look weak and vindictive. They confirm everyone's worst fears about your tyranny and increase their sympathy for the young, persecuted Alexander. Every move you make against him just makes him more popular. He becomes a martyr in the making, and you are casting yourself as the villain. The situation comes to a head over a seemingly minor issue. You spread a rumor that your cousin is gravely ill, on the verge of death. Your motive is transparent. You are testing the waters, trying to gauge the reaction of the army and the Senate to the idea of Alexander's demise. The reaction is not what you hoped for. When the rumor reaches the barracks of the Praetorian Guard, they don't mourn quietly. They explode in anger. They believe you have harmed him. They refuse to perform their duties. They openly demand to see Alexander, an Ivan duel, presented before them in the camp. It is a mutiny, a direct challenge to your authority. You are trapped. Your mother, Julia, has my house, and your grandmother, Julia Maizay, plead with you. They tell you that you have no choice. You must bow to the Praetorians' demand. To refuse would mean open warfare in the streets of Rome, a war you would almost certainly lose. Swallowing your pride, you agree. A grim procession makes its way from the palace to the Praetorian camp. You and Alexander ride together in the imperial carriage. It must have been the most awkward chariot ride in history. You, the emperor, seething with resentment, and Alexander, the popular heir, probably terrified but trying to maintain a stoic calm. When you arrive at the camp, the soldiers erupt in cheers for Alexander. They lift him onto their shoulders. They greet you with a stony, contemptuous silence. They have made their preference clear. They are Alexander's men now. They are only tolerating you. You have looked into the eyes of your own army and seen that their loyalty is gone. It has been transferred to the boy standing beside you. This public humiliation is the beginning of the end. You retreat to the palace, not with a sense of defeat, but with a burning desire for revenge. You tried to get rid of your rival politically, and it failed. Now, a much darker thought begins to form in your mind. If you cannot strip him of his title, perhaps you can strip him of his life. The humiliation at the Praetorian camp pushes you over the edge. The last vestiges of political calculation are consumed by pure, desperate rage. You decide that your popular young cousin, Severus Alexander, must be eliminated. You can no longer tolerate his shadow eclipsing your son. You give the order for his assassination. Your plan is clumsy, a reflection of your political incompetence. You dispatch a few of your loyal palace guards, your last remaining supporters, to carry out the deed. But Alexander is not unprotected. His mother, Julia Mama Ia, and your grandmother, Julia Maze, have anticipated this move. They have surrounded the young heir with their own network of spies and loyal soldiers. They have also been systematically bribing key officers within the Praetorian Guard, securing their allegiance not to you, the reigning emperor, but to the future they see in Alexander. When your assassins make their move, they are intercepted. The attempt fails, and word of it spreads like wildfire through the city and, most importantly, through the Praetorian barracks. This is the final, unforgivable act. Trying to murder the beloved, officially adopted heir to the throne, a boy they see as their own, is an act of war against the Guard itself. The Praetorians are in an uproar, but this is not the chaotic mutiny of before. This is a decisive, angry shift. They are no longer just protecting Alexander, they are now actively hostile towards you. They begin to hunt down and execute your inner circle, your novices, your unqualified cronies, the officials you appointed based on bizarre criteria one by one. They are found and killed by the furious soldiers. The streets of Rome run with the blood of your favorites. Heraclius, your husband, the charioteer, is captured and put to death. The dancer Carmazion manages to escape the initial purge, but his power is shattered. Your entire government, the strange and corrupt system you built, is liquidated in a matter of hours. You are in the palace, hearing the sounds of the purge, realizing that the instruments of your power have been destroyed. You are emperor in name only. The city is now controlled by the Praetorian Guard, and they are not your guards anymore. In this moment of supreme crisis, your mother, Julia Iemias, stays by your side. Her fate is inextricably tied to yours. She was the co-architect of your scandalous reign, the president of the Women's Senate, the mother of the sacrilegious emperor. She knows that Alexander's rise means her fall. The bond between you and your mother, which had been a source of your power, now becomes a shared vulnerability. Your grandmother, Julia Maise, and your aunt, Julia Mama Ie, make their final move. They go to the Praetorian camp. They are not there to plead for you. They are there to sanction the coup. They stoke the soldiers' anger, promising them a huge donative, a massive bonus in Alexander's name once the transfer of power is complete. They give the soldiers the green light. The matriarch who put you on the throne has now officially signed your death warrant. Historians still debate the precise motivations of Julia Maise. Was this cold, calculated pragmatism from the very beginning? Did she see you merely as a disposable tool to regain power for the family, to be discarded once a better option was available, or was it the reluctant, heartbreaking decision of a grandmother who saw that her grandson had become a monster who would destroy everything she had built? Was it a lust for power, or a desperate act of damage control? The truth is likely a tragic mixture of both. She was protecting the dynasty, and you had become the single greatest threat to it. The soldiers, now with the official blessing of the most powerful women in the empire and the promise of riches, are ready to finish the job. They know you are in the palace. They know you have nowhere left to run. The stage is set for the final, bloody act. The sun is about to set on the reign of the sun god's priest. You know the end is near. The sounds from the city are no longer the chants of your priests or the music of your festivals. They are the sounds of a city turning against you, the tramp of soldiers' boots, the shouts of angry mobs, the chilling silence where your authority used to be. The Praetorians are coming for you. In these last, desperate hours, your theatrical instincts take over. If you are going to die, you will do it in a way that is as decadent and dramatic as your life. You retreat to a special chamber you had prepared within the palace, a tower designed for a spectacular exit. You begin to plan your own death as if it were your final, greatest performance. You are not interested in a simple, soldierly death by the sword. That is too common, too vulgar. You want to choose your end. You lay out your options. Beside you is a collection of fine daggers with jewel-encrusted hilts, their blades sharpened to a perfect edge. You contemplate a noble suicide, a final act of defiance. You also have prepared cords of twisted purple silk, the imperial color, so you could hang yourself in style. Finally, you have a collection of potent, fast-acting poison stored in ornate golden boxes. You could simply drift away into a painless sleep. This obsession with a beautiful death is a recurring theme among some of the more notorious Roman emperors. Nero, for example, also agonized over the aesthetics of his suicide. For you, it seems to be the logical conclusion of a life lived as a performance. The final scene must be as carefully choreographed as the first. You allegedly built funeral pyres around your tower, constructed not from common wood, but from fragrant, expensive incense woods, so that your body would be consumed in a cloud of perfume. You declare that you want your favorites, the few who have not yet been killed by the Praetorians, to die with you, a final, grim entourage to accompany you into the afterlife. But this grand, artistic suicide never happens. As you contemplate which beautiful method of death to choose, your nerve fails you. The daggers feel too cold, the silken cord too tight, the poison too final, the will to live. Even a life that has been reduced to a few final, hunted hours, is stronger than your desire for a poetic ending. The historian Herodian paints a picture of you hesitating, procrastinating, unable to commit to the final act. While you waver, the situation outside deteriorates. The Praetorians are no longer just hunting your cronies, they are now storming the palace itself. The guards you had left, few and untrustworthy, either flee or join the attackers. The noise gets closer. The shouts are in the palace corridors now. This is where the historical accounts get a bit murky, colored by the writer's desire to portray you as a coward in your final moments. The story goes that as the soldiers burst into your chambers, you are not standing defiantly with a dagger in hand. You are trying to hide. The grand suicide tower, meant for a dramatic exit, becomes just another room in a palace that is no longer safe. The debate among historians is whether this suicide preparation scene was real or a literary invention. Was it a factual account of your final hours, showcasing your blend of theatricality and cowardice, or was it a story created after your death to rob you of any shred of dignity by portraying you as someone who planned a grand suicide but couldn't go through with it? Your enemies could emphasize your un-Roman lack of courage. It's the final insult you couldn't even die correctly. Whether you genuinely planned this elaborate end or not, the reality is that your fate is no longer in your hands. The audience has stormed the stage. The soldiers are at the door. Your carefully planned final performance is about to be cancelled, replaced by a brutal, messy improvisation. The purple silks and poison cups are pushed aside. The final scene will be written not by you, but by the cold steel of the Praetorian Guard. The moment of final and dignified chaos arrives. The soldiers, their faces grim with anger, burst into your imperial apartments. There is no negotiation, no final speech. The time for performance is over. You and your mother, Julia S. away EMIRs, are together in these last moments. A desperate pair clinging to the last shreds of a life of absolute power. You don't face them down. You run. You and your mother scramble for a place to hide, according to the most popular account. You find a large chest or coffer, the kind used for storing clothing or valuables, and you both climb inside, pulling the lid shut. It's a pathetic, desperate attempt to become invisible. The Emperor of the Roman world and his mother, huddled in the dark, hoping the storm will pass them by. But the soldiers are methodical. They tear the room apart. They overturn furniture, slash tapestries, and search every corner. They find the chest. They heave it open, and there you are, blinking in the light, cornered and terrified. What happens next is a frantic, brutal struggle. Your mother, in a final act of maternal instinct, supposedly throws her arms around you, trying to shield you with her own body. She pleads with the soldiers, begs them to spare her son. Her pleas are ignored. The soldiers are not there to take prisoners. They have their orders, fueled by their own rage and the promise of your grandmother's gold. They drag you out. You and your mother are killed on the spot, in a frenzy of violence. The year is 222. You are only 18 years old. Your reign, which lasted just under 4 years, is over. The scene then shifts from the private chambers of the palace to the public stage of the Praetorian camp. The soldiers drag your bodies from the palace. They want to show the world, and their fellow soldiers, that the deed is done. The tyrant is dead. They parade your bodies through the streets, a grim spectacle for the Roman populace who, just a few years earlier, had watched your grand entry into the city. This is where the story gets even more degrading. The soldiers, in their fury, refuse you a normal burial. They attempt to stuff your body into a sewer grating, a final act of contempt, but your body is too large to fit. Frustrated, they attach weights to it and your mother's, and they throw you both into the Tiber River from the Aemilia End Bridge. This was a fate reserved for the worst criminals. It was not just an execution, it was an attempt to erase you, to deny you a final resting place, to pollute your memory for all time. Historians have questioned some of the more dramatic details of this final day. The image of you and your mother hiding in a chest is so perfectly symbolic of your cowardice that it might be a later embellishment, a piece of propaganda to make the story even better. The core facts, however, are undisputed. You and your mother were killed by the Praetorian Guard within the palace. Your bodies were abused, and your remains were cast into the Tiber. The contrast between your planned death and your actual death could not be more stark. You envisioned a fragrant pyre, a jeweled dagger, a final scene of decadent beauty. You got a sword in a back room, a panicked scramble, and a watery grave in the filth of the city's river. It was a brutal, ugly end to a life that had been lived as a self-conscious work of art. As your body sinks into the murky water of the Tiber, the city breathes a sigh of relief. The strange, chaotic fever dream of your reign is finally over. Your cousin, the young and respectable Severus Alexander, is immediately proclaimed emperor. Your grandmother, Julia Maze, and your aunt, Julia Mama Haike, the true victors of this family tragedy, stand as the new powers behind the throne. They have successfully course-corrected. The dynasty is safe, but the price was the life of a grandson, a nephew, a boy they themselves had placed upon the throne. The final scene wasn't a beautiful suicide, it was a grim, familial execution. Your life ends in the most ignominious way possible, not with a bang, not even with a whimper, but with a frantic, desperate scramble that ends in a palace latrine. The historical accounts of your final moments are chaotic and contradictory, but the most persistent and brutal version of the story strips you of every last shred of imperial dignity. In this telling of the tale, the scene is not a grand chamber with chests and tapestries. It's the sordid, functional reality of the palace's private toilet. As the Praetorians storm your apartments, you and your mother, in a last-ditch effort to escape, seek refuge in the one place you think they might not look, the latrine. It's a small, stark room, a world away from the gilded halls and silk-draped rooms where you lived out your fantasies. The soldiers, relentless in their search, find you there. The final confrontation happens in this cramped and dignified space. There is no room for heroic last stands or tearful pleas. There is only the grim finality of the soldier's intent. They kill you and your mother right there, among the cold stone and plumbing of the imperial toilet. This version of your death, whether strictly accurate or not, became the accepted narrative for a reason. It was the ultimate humiliation. The emperor who saw himself as a living god, the high priest of the sun, who married a Vestal virgin and tried to remake the heavens, meets his end in the most profane and earthly place imaginable. It's a story that serves as a powerful moral lesson. The higher you fly, the lower you fall. It's a detail that your enemies, the senatorial historians writing the first draft of your history, would have savored. It's the perfect, degrading punchline to the 4-year-long joke that they considered your reign to be. The debate over the exact location of your death, a storeroom, a private chamber, a latrine, is one of those small but fascinating arguments that historians engage in. Does it matter precisely where you died to a biographer? It does. The location colors the entire narrative. A death in a treasure chest speaks of cowardice and greed. A death in a latrine speaks of filth and degradation. The fact that the sources can't agree is, in itself, a reflection of the chaos surrounding your demise. The end was so swift, so brutal, and so messy that no one got a clear picture. After the killing, your body is dragged out of the toilet, out of the palace, and the final public desecration begins. The soldiers, now a mob driven by bloodlust and a desire to please their new masters, take possession of your corpse. They parade it through the streets. But some accounts add another layer of insult. Before throwing you into the Tiber, they drag your body to the Circus Maximus, the great chariot racing stadium. This is a place of deep irony. It was the home of the chariot drivers you had loved and elevated. Like Heracles, dragging your body through the dirt of the circus was a way of saying, you belong with the low-life performers you so admired. Then comes the final act of disposal. They tie your body to that of your mother, weigh you down, and toss you into the river. This act of throwing a body into the Tiber was symbolic. It wasn't just about getting rid of the evidence. In Roman belief, a proper burial was essential for the peace of the soul in the afterlife. To be denied a grave, to have your body lost to the river, was to be condemned in this world and the next. It was a curse enacted upon your very memory. As the ripples fade on the surface of the Tiber, the city can begin the process of forgetting. But it's not enough to just kill you and dispose of your body. The state itself must now officially erase you. The transfer of power to your cousin, Severus Alexander, is seamless. Your grandmother and aunt are in control. The fever has broken. Now, the cleanup can begin. And the first order of business is to make sure that no one ever speaks your name again. With your body lost somewhere in the silt of the Tiber, the Roman state begins the final act of your destruction, the systematic erasure of your memory. This was an official Roman process. A formal decree from the Senate known as damnatio memoriae, the condemnation of memory. It was the state's ultimate punishment, reserved for the worst traitors and tyrants. It meant that, legally, you had never existed. The process is chillingly thorough. Your name, Marcus Aurelius Antonius, the one you adopted to link yourself to Caracalla, is chiseled off every public monument in the empire, on triumphal arches, on temple inscriptions, on milestones along Roman roads from Britain to Egypt. A blank space appears where your name once was. Sometimes, the name of your successor, Severus Alexander, is carved over the erasure, literally writing you out of history and replacing you with him. All of your statues are pulled down and destroyed. Coins bearing your image are recalled and melted down. Your official portraits are taken from public buildings and burned. Every law you passed is rescinded. Every decree you issued is nullified. The Senate, the very institution you so openly mock, now holds the power to edit you out of the official record. They do so with a vengeance. Even your chosen name for your god is erased. The name Elagabalus, which you took from your deity and which we now use to identify you. was not what you were called in your lifetime. You were Emperor Marcus Aurelius Antonius. Elagabalus was a nickname, a term of derision used by your enemies to forever link you to your foreign god and your un-Roman ways. By a strange twist of history, the insult stuck. The name you were proudest of, that of your god, has become your own infamous moniker. The Elagabalus, your grand temple on the Palatine Hill, is rededicated. The black stone is unceremoniously packed up and shipped back home to Emesa in Syria. All the sacred Roman objects you had kidnapped and placed in your temple are returned to their original shrines with great public ceremony. The state religion is reset. The brief, bizarre reign of the sun god is over. Jupiter is back on top. This process of damnatio memoria is fascinating to historians because it was never completely successful. You can chisel a name off a monument, but you can't erase a memory from a person's mind. The very act of erasing creates a conspicuous blank, a scar on the historical record that begs the question who was here before the attempt to destroy your memory, ironically, is what helped to preserve it. Furthermore, the senatorial historians who despised you men like Tyrant and Herodian made sure you would never be forgotten. They wrote down your story in lurid, damning detail. They recorded your scandals, your pranks, your religious fervor, and your gender-bending performances. Of course, their accounts are deeply biased. They are the ultimate victors, writing the history of the vanquished. They paint you as a monster, a degenerate, a madman. This leaves us with the central, unresolved puzzle of your life. Who were you really, the monster described in the ancient texts? Say cruel, blasphemous tyrant who deserved his fate, or were you something else, a profoundly misunderstood teenager, a religious visionary, a figure of gender nonconformity, crushed by a conservative system that could not tolerate your otherness? Was your reign an act of deliberate provocation, or a tragic cultural misunderstanding amplified by the echo chamber of absolute power? The academic debate rages on. Every generation reinterprets you. You have been seen as a symbol of Oriental despotism, a queer icon, a cautionary tale about power, and a case study in teenage rebellion. The truth is, we will never know for sure. The person you were is buried under layers of hostile propaganda and the rubble of your own self-destructive behavior. All we have is the story, a fragmented, sensational, and utterly captivating narrative of a boy priest who became an emperor and, for wild years, turned the Roman world upside down. Your enemies tried to erase you, but in doing so, they made you immortal. The story is over now. The storm of your brief, chaotic life has passed. The city of Rome has returned to its rhythms. The old gods are back in their temples, and the blank spaces on the monuments are slowly weathering away, becoming just another part of the ancient stone. The memory of you, the boy who danced for a sun god, begins to fade, transforming from a sharp, painful reality into a whisper, a legend, a strange tale to be told on a quiet night. And now, the journey is ending. Feel the ground beneath you become soft, the hard edges of history melting away, the echoes of the chanting, the clanging of cymbals, the shouts in the palace, they all recede, replaced by a gentle, quiet hum. You can let go of the sulks and the stones, the power and the fear. There are no more decisions to be made, no more pranks to be played, no more enemies to fear. There is only stillness. The current of the Tiber, which was once your cold, final resting place, now becomes a gentle stream, carrying you softly into the vast, quiet ocean of sleep. The light of the palace dim one last time. Not in panic, but in peace. The sun you worshipped so fiercely has set, giving way to the soft, silver light of the moon. Let the quietness envelop you now. Let the story dissolve into dream. There is nothing left to do but drift, and float, and be at peace. The world can wait until morning. The end of the article. Good night.